All right, so in this activity, what we're going to do is take a look at a map of all the penguins and where they're distributed around the entire world. That map is located at the very bottom of this page. And I've actually given you the key here. So you can see every species is mapped out on here for you. This is a good reference for you. We'll scroll back on up. We'll also be using these penguin ID cards. If you click that, it should bring up a link to all these penguin ID cards. And there'll be information in here that you will be reading and looking at to help you answer your questions. I'm going to go ahead and go on back. All right. So what we're going to look at here, I'm going to kind of walk you through some of these questions in case you have any type of difficulty in understanding what they're saying. So the first one here is explain why it could be possible to have the same species of penguin living in multiple geographic locations. So how can we have 2, 3, maybe 4 different species of penguins living in one location? How are they able to do that? The next question, use that evidence to describe similar adaptations that all penguins have to their habitat regardless of location. Again, we want to use our penguin ID cards and the information in there to help us find those similar adaptations that we would read about in each one of those penguins there. Maybe not all the penguins, but a lot of them might have some similar adaptations. Just list them here. Next one is, we don't know, are there any differences in physical adaptations according to the geographical locations? In other words, is where they're located, does that make a difference in how they are physically looking, their characteristics? So use that map and any other evidence, possibly the ones in the penguin ID cards, to help you describe any differences in physical traits that you see among the species. Now we'll definitely be using the map now for these next questions. It's pretty easy, these first couple. How many species of penguins are endemic, which means can only be found in one location? How many in more than one location? And use any reasoning you have to explain why you think some penguins are geographically isolated from other penguin species. What would make them so isolated that none other species are around them? And then, do you think we can tell what a species a penguin is based on location alone? So if we just look at one location, do you think we could tell, hey, that's definitely that kind of a penguin based on the fact that I'm finding that penguin right here, right now? That'd just be a yes, no, or not enough info. You just write it in there and explain why you came up with that. Next question is, since different species of penguin may occupy the same habitat, explain why they continue to remain separate species. So in other words, let's say you have 2 penguins that live in the same place. Why don't they merge? Why don't they become one species? Why do you think that what are some reasons that they could have that keeps them separate species? Our next question here, adaptive radiation is when populations diverge from a common ancestor into new species, each of which is adapted to its own unique niche. Its own, how it uses its habitat, its job, its role, and its habitat. That's a niche. So provide evidence to highlight an example as to how this may have occurred in some of the species of penguins. So let's go back and reread this. Adaptive radiation is when populations diverge from a common ancestor into new species, each of which is adapted to its own unique niche. So, looking at our penguin ID cards, thinking back about those different species and those different physical traits they have, we want to provide evidence to highlight an example as to how this may have occurred in some species of penguins. So, why would some penguins start to look different and start to diverge from that common ancestor based on its niche or its role in its habitat? And then finally, what types of biological evidence would you need to look at to determine evolutionary relatedness between penguin species? So, in other words, what do you think, anything biological, evidence, ideas that you think we would need to look at to really determine their evolutionary relatedness between species? Go ahead and put your ideas right there. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.